All right, hey everybody, welcome back. This is going to be lesson 29, connected to chapter 8 of Toliver's Secret. I hope these lessons have been going well for you. And again, if you're having questions or concerns or things are not as clear or you have suggestions of how you'd like the videos to go, please reach out, either via your parents or leaving comments when you post your work. I've been noticing the videos have been going a little bit over 30 minutes, so my goal is to keep it under so that you can stay focused and make sure everything's done. So we're going to dive right into it. Here we go. So, like I said, this will be involving pages 92 to 106 of Toliver's Secret, which is chapter 8. This is leading us in 29, and our goal today is to be able to describe a setting using specific details in a text. Now, you can read this to yourselves, the transferable takeaway. This is why this is important. But in my own words, this is an important skill because in very early elementary grades, like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, the setting often doesn't have much to do with the story. It doesn't. The story can be taking place anytime, anywhere, for most stories that we hear. But as we start reading more and more complex text, knowing the details of the setting will, one, connect to the problem, and oftentimes the setting is creating the problem for the character, so it creates some things that they have to solve. And two, it actually gives us some context about where the characters are coming from. Why is this important to the story? And also, a lot of times, especially when you're reading books in school, the setting will give you a specific reason of why we're talking about that specific book. We'll see in Toliver's Secret, we know that we're reading this book because it's taking place during the time of the American Revolution, and a lot of the things that are happening during that time are connected to the theme that we're discussing about understanding people's perspective and the ideas of revolution in general. So that's why it's important to be able to notice the details of a setting, because they connect to a character's problem, but it also gives us a reason why we are reading what we're reading. Okay? So our big goal at the end is to be able to describe the setting of chapter 8 and use specific details from the text to show some of the things that we discover about it. And then we're also going to explain why the setting presents challenges for Ellen in completing her journey. And so putting those two pieces together, being able to describe the setting and then why it's important to the story and how it connects to her challenge. Okay. So, again, this is assuming that you've already read chapter 8 either on your own or watched the two videos that I posted that have me reading it and giving some of my thoughts, and that you've already created a gist statement for the chapter. So I would recommend right now going back and rereading your gist statement to get it fresh in your mind. For our benefit, I will read you mine so that the chapter is fresh in your mind. I know this is not the neatest handwriting, so it's my own notes, so I'll read it on to you. It says, Ellen finds out that she is not in the right town. She is not in Elizabeth. She tries to hire a stagecoach, but there are none to be had. She asks an old woodcutter to take her to Elizabethtown, but he says that there's no way. She sees Higgins again, who tells her that even when she's afraid, she just has to be brave. And when she keeps that in mind, she begins her 10-mile journey on her own to Elizabethtown. And so that is, in general, what has happened in this chapter. And so, while you're reading it, if you're struggling with some of the words, here are some of the vocabulary terms. The word induce, which is a verb that means to cause. Just another word for cause. Something that is induced just means it caused something else to happen. Gnarled is an adjective describing something bent and twisted. It usually refers to like trees, branches, or roots that happen to be gnarled, but sometimes the word knuckles are gnarled if they're old and they have arthritis and things like that. Gnarled is a word for that. The word groom, when it's used as a noun, is someone who takes care of horses or keeps a stable. Not many people have this job anymore, but it used to be a very, very important job that was usually given to younger kids to start to teach them responsibility, but take care of the animals that were important to people's livelihoods during these times. And then last, the word riding crop is a short riding whip used on horses to make them go. You saw in the chapter that a person riding a horse used the riding crop to fend Ellen off, and so it's just a small little whip. To get our brain activated, in today's text, Ellen thinks she has arrived at her destination, but is actually somewhere else. When is the time that you got lost or wound up somewhere you didn't want to go? So When I say to, pause the video and take a minute to write this down, type it in, or just think about it so that you can get your brain moving in a direction and putting yourself in Ellen's shoes a little bit. So go ahead and pause the video. Now that you're back, there's countless stories that you can share. A time that I and my family got lost. My brother and I were actually driving back to upstate New York from New York City. We didn't have our cell phone with us at the time because my brother had left it at home, and so we didn't have any directions. We just had to follow the signs, and we ended up taking a wrong exit, and we ended up finding a really, really nice, not fancy, but family-owned Italian restaurant, and eating probably the best pasta I've ever had in my entire life. So sometimes getting lost can be scary, but sometimes when you get lost, you actually find something that you wouldn't find otherwise. So I hope that that got your mind connected to what we're doing today. Actually, always, I'm going to go down and actually start with the exit ticket and the criteria for success so we know what we're doing. And then as we go along, most of the questions that we answer here, and I believe this time just about all of them, are going to directly connect to the objective. And so we'll see that the questions that we answer throughout actually help us accomplish the goal. So again, our goal today is to describe the setting of Chapter 8 of Toliver Sequence using specific details, which means we're going to take some exact words from the text. We're going to explain why the setting presents challenges for Ellen in completing her journey. And so our description should have details that show the place and time of the setting. It should also give some details that show how the character feels about the setting. It should also tell how the setting is important to the main story problem. And we want to make sure that we list accurate details from the text to support the description. And that's going to be the challenge in using details today. Is there's a lot of details that the author uses to describe the setting, and we're going to have to just pick the most important ones, the ones that we think most important that prove what we're trying to prove. So let's get to it. And the very first question to guys is, where's the town that she's in, Perth Amboy, and what is it like? And if we look at the very beginning of the story, we can, not the story, of the chapter, we can find that information. I'm going to give you some time to do that now, so go ahead and pause the video. When you come back, I'll give you my thoughts. Now that you're back, let's take a look at what the text says. So, actually on page 94, at the very top we see Ellen is talking to a man that is working here in Perth Amboy and says, Elizabeth, actually let's back up to page 93. It says, Ellen's asked, isn't this Elizabethtown? And a man says, nay, it's Perth Amboy. And then over here, it says, Elizabeth is back there. There we go. The man pointed with his chin back along the shore, about 10 miles or so. And so Perth Amboy is a town that's across the river from New York City, like Elizabethtown, but it's about 10 miles away from there. And so that's the first part of our question. We'll get to the what is it like in a moment. We'll make sure we get this part down first. So we'll say Perth, let's make this down here. Perth Amboy is a town across the river from New York City, but it is about 10 miles away from Elizabethtown. And now when I ask, what is it like? There's a lot that we can put there. And I actually mentioned this in my reading out loud videos. Something that the author points out is this is a busy place. If you take a look at the very bottom of page 92, it says, the cries of cannoneers, the rumbling of wagon trains, the pounding of the heavy boots of marching men filled the air of Elizabethtown, and over it all sounded the drums, the screeches, fifes, and the wailing bagpipes. And so this is a bunch of different sounds and activities that the author is describing. And I apologize for that being blurry. I'm trying my best. A whole bunch of different sounds and activities that are going on in the town. So I think this shows that this is a very active, busy town. And all of those activities are things that the British soldiers are engaged with. So it's the town is very active, busy, and noisy with all of the British soldiers, say, moving about it. Or let's not moving, let's say going about the business. Great. And so there was a lot more other information that we can give about what it's like, but I think that captures the biggest part of it. Excellent. So let's talk about when when does Ellen get to Perth Amboy? This may not seem that important, but it actually plays into a big problem in the story. So go ahead and pause the video and see if you can find when she gets there. Great, now that you're back, I'm going to guide what I found. This was going to be on page number 9, nope, it's 100 and... Oop, there we go. It's the very last page of the chapter, page 106. Sorry, I had it marked and then I lost it in here. There are a lot of things marked on this page. Right here. Higgins saying, must be nigh on to 3 o'clock, but it's a good road. You can walk it at night. And then right underneath, Ellen says that she's going to run most of the way to get there before dark. Okay? And so the first part tells us exactly what we want. She gets there around 3 o'clock. But that second part will connect to our next question, which is why she's worried about how she'll get to Elizabeth and what problem does the setting create for her. So let's just answer this very quickly first. Ellen gets to Perth Amboy at around 3 o'clock. And I know it's a simple answer, and sometimes it would have been okay to just write 3 o'clock, but I think it's a good practice to always answer with a complete sentence. It helps with our speaking. It helps with just doing it so that you get in the habit of it. So when you're writing your own responses, make sure that they're in complete sentences as well. Excellent. So next question asks, why is Ellen worried about how she will get to Elizabethtown, and what problems does the setting create for her? Okay. So there's 2 parts to this. Make sure that you find your evidence for both parts and that you're able to explain the problem that is exactly going on with her. You can pause the video and go ahead and do that now. Right, and now that you're back, there are a few things. So the first is, why is Ellen worried about how she will get to Elizabethtown? I think there's a couple things, and I'll show you evidence for a few of them in a second. The first is that it's 10 miles away. That's really far for her. She's walked 10 miles before, but only once, and she was with her mother. So that's a really, really challenging thing. Another thing is why she's worried about it. It's because she's worried that it's going to be dark. She's worried that it's going to be nighttime, and that with all these soldiers about, she doesn't know what's going to happen there. And so both of those things are why she's worried about how she will get there. Let's take a look on page 94. I'll show you that very quickly. Some evidence that proves that. Right in the middle it says, he hadn't said she might have to walk 10 miles in the winter when it was getting late and without knowing the way. Right, so she's really worried because it's getting late, it's probably going to get dark, and she doesn't know her way there. Okay? This is a really simple and solid piece of evidence that we're going to be using to prove it, so we'll make sure we get that in a moment. Okay, later on in the chapter 2, on page 97, this connects to the second part of the question, so I'll actually bring that up right now. It says, what problem does the setting create for her? Now, this can go really, really deep into the different layers of how much the setting creates a problem for her. But I think this piece of evidence here actually gives a really clear button. This is almost all of page 97. And this is when Ellen is talking to the woodcutter. He says, if you wait for a stagecoach, she said sourly, you'll wait till doomsday. Why? Ellen asked anxiously. The man slammed 4 logs down on the ground before he spoke. Because there ain't none. None at all? Ellen cried. The British took them. Only officers ride on the stage now. No common people. The man angrily yanked more chunks of wood from his cart and swore at his old horse. But how can I get to Elizabethtown? Can't. And so this whole section here shows that Ellen wants to be able to just ride in a stagecoach to get to, which is a cart that horses would pull, that people could take, almost like old style taxis, to get to and from. Oop, gotta change this. Sorry, guys. To and from where they were going back in these times. But this part shows that the British have taken all the stagecoaches, and so the setting, not only of Perth Amboy in the winter before it gets dark, but also the setting of taking place during the Revolutionary War, is part of what creates the problem for her. Because the British soldiers are there, she has a really hard time getting the transportation she needs to go to Elizabethtown, which she wouldn't need to go to at all if the British weren't there. And so there's a lot of really deep layers of, depending on how far you want to go, with the layers and layers of problems that the setting creates, of how far you want to go down in the setting. And so when we're giving our response, we're going to try to make it as clear as possible that she's unable to get to Elizabethtown because it's getting late and she's worried about going at night. The British have taken the stagecoaches, so she can't use that. And she's also just a really far distance. She's worried that her age is not going to be able to walk that far. And so let's include those. Right. So first part is Ellen is worried about getting to Elizabethtown because it is 10 miles away and it is getting late. She's nervous about walking at night because she doesn't know the way, and there are a lot of enemy soldiers around. Right, before I go to the second part, we've been asked to provide details to prove this, and it's always good to find details to prove it, so I'm going to make sure I include those details in the way that we learned. I know this because on page, let's just double check for ourselves. We're going to use page 94. On page 94, it says, and now we're about to use quotations, so we know we got to put a comma and then the quotation marks. He hadn't said she might have to walk 10 miles in the winter when it was getting late and without knowing the way. And end quotes there. Okay? So this evidence is right from the text, and it proves the idea that she was nervous about walking at night because she didn't know the way, and it was far and it was getting late. Okay? So what problem does the setting create for her? The setting creates many problems. Like these many problems. It makes her feel worried that she won't be able to do what she needs to do, or she won't be able to accomplish her task, accomplish her mission. And makes it harder. We'll say the setting. The setting makes it harder for her to get to Elizabethtown because the British soldiers have taken the stagecoaches, and I'm actually going to add something here that I didn't discuss now, but now that I've been typing, and this happens sometimes when you start to answer the question, you actually think of something different. The stagecoach man doesn't want to help her. He said things in the past he would have helped, but now he's not because he's worried about the British taking all of his things too. And so the British soldiers have taken the stagecoaches, and all the people living there are nervous too. People in Perth Amboy are afraid to help because of the soldiers that are there. Excellent. And so this, like I said, this is this is basically our exit ticket. Just understanding that this setting here creates a big problem for her. Right? And so that connects directly to the fourth part, is how is the setting important to the story? The way I generally like to think about this, well, first, pause the video and give yourself some chance to think about it and write it down. And now that you're back, thinking about why something is important to a story, a good thing to do is to think about what would the story be like without it. So the setting here, if let's say she had gone right to Elizabethtown, right? She hadn't got stuck here. Well, how would the story be different? Well, we wouldn't see at the end of this chapter that she had to be brave and do something that she didn't think that she had to do. We wouldn't get the sense of how chaotic and how dangerous the town was because of all the British soldiers there. And honestly, the story just would feel kind of short, and it feels like it wouldn't have really been a journey. She would have just gotten on the boat and gone across. And yeah, she had some scary things that happened before, like having her bread stolen and getting picked up by Dow and put onto the boat. But the story probably would have just seemed like it was not fully told. We wouldn't have been as engaged. But now that we have more problems, that it makes it a more engaging story. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about when we say it's important. So the setting is important. I want to separate this so you guys can see. There you go. Is important to the story. Because giving Ellen more problems to solve and more chances to show her bravery make the story more interesting. If she didn't get lost, or if she didn't go to the wrong town, she wouldn't have had to make the decision to be brave and walk by herself. And we wouldn't have seen how dangerous and chaotic life was for people living at the time. Excellent. All right, so we've done our thinking questions. So if we use what we've thought about here, some of it we can actually just copy and paste. We should be able to answer this exit ticket fairly well. So, describe the setting of Chapter 8 of Toliver's Secret using specific details. Explain why the setting presents challenges for Ellen in completing her journey. Yeah. And so, let's go ahead. I'm going to pause now and give you a chance to answer this on your own. And then when you're back, we'll answer it together. So, now that you're back, let's go through and just make sure we do the things that would describe this setting very well. First, we want to say where and when this is. So it's taking place in Perth Amboy during the Revolutionary War. And we can even say, because it's important to the story, that it's in the afternoon getting closer to nighttime. So the setting of Chapter 8 and Toliver's Secret is a book, so we want to make sure it is 1L? Yeah, 1L. Secret. Making sure it's underlined. Is the town of Perth Amboy during the Revolutionary War. It takes place in the mid-afternoon, getting closer to nighttime. And like we described before, we should describe what Perth Amboy is like. Perth Amboy is a very busy town across the river from New York City, about 10 miles away from Ellen's destination, Elizabethtown. Elizabethtown. There we go. All right, so we've done this. We gave details that show the place and time of the setting. Okay. Give some details about how the character feels about the setting. It's what we talked about here, right? She's worried. And this is our evidence. So we can actually just write the same thing here. Boop. Paste it. And just so you know what was written, Ellen is worried about getting to Elizabethtown because it is 10 miles away and it's getting late. She is nervous about walking at night because she doesn't know the way and there are lots of enemy soldiers around. And then our evidence to prove this was on page 94. It says, he hadn't said she might have to walk 10 miles in the winter when it's getting late without knowing the way. Right. So, we've done that part. And then the last part, how it's important to the main story problem. Right here, correct? And also here. The setting makes it harder for her to get to Elizabethtown because British soldiers have taken the stagecoaches and all the people in Brooklyn are afraid to help because of all the soldiers that are there. And again, as all these things are happening, let me be more clear about that. As in all these videos, I'm giving you my thoughts and my responses. There are a plethora of different responses that you can give. As long as you do hit these criteria, and as long as you explain yourself in a logical way, you can come up with lots of different responses. Tons of different evidence that you could have used. Some of the problems that it creates is it also just has her doubt herself. We didn't talk much about that, but it has her doubt herself and her ability to accomplish her goal. It also just creates the problem that she doesn't feel like she has any friends other than the enemy soldiers. She feels very isolated and alone. So there's a lot of different answers. If your answers aren't exactly what mine were, that's fine. If you're not certain if they're good or not, or if they're on the right track of your thinking, like I said before, please reach out. And we can discuss your thoughts and see what you did to get those thoughts. And if your thinking is on the right track, then hey, wonderful, even if it's different. But if you're way off, then we'll make sure that we can get you back on the right path, like Ellen is. Right. And so if your response looks similar to this, or is in that same vein, then you're doing wonderfully. We'll take a few minutes now just to discuss the clothing thoughts. It kind of wraps everything up and connects it to the story itself. And then that'll be the end of the lesson. So first closing thought is, how does Ellen show she is fighting for freedom in chapter 8? Take a minute now. You can pause and answer that yourself. Right. Now that you're back, I think it shows that she's fighting for freedom because she's doing something very, very challenging. She's going to have to walk on a strange road at night, possibly, to a place that she doesn't know where she's going because she believes that the Patriots are in the right, that they should have the rights to make their own laws and have their own government. And so by delivering this message, she's fighting for freedom as well. She's not holding a gun, but what she's doing takes just as much bravery, and she's helping out in a way that she thinks is more important. And then in the beginning, we talked about a time when we got lost. And so the very last slide says, what more did we learn about finding your way when you're lost? And is Ellen's solution a good one? Take a minute now to think about how that connects to your life. Now that you're back, I think we found out that when you're lost, it's okay to ask for help. If you see, she went to ask the woodcutter, who wasn't very helpful, but then she talked to Higgins, who gave her some moral advice, and that helped her not necessarily find her way, but find the courage to find her own way. And then, is Ellen's solution a good one? That's up to you. I think in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. I think it's a good one because it shows that she's brave, and it shows that she's putting her safety on the line to help out a cause that she believes in with the Patriots. But it's also incredibly dangerous, and I'm not sure a young child like herself should be walking that way by herself at night, especially as a parent. That gets me worried. And so that's an opinion question. That's completely up to you, as long as you can explain your reasoning. As always, I just want to say thank you for putting this work in. If you're doing the questions and you're thinking and you're reading, you're improving immensely, and you're going to be more prepared when it is that we get back to school. I hope you're staying safe, that you're finding ways to keep your mind active. Excuse me. And we'll see you at the next lesson. As always, reach out if you have questions, concerns, or suggestions. Goodbye.